We're switching back to athletics for this segment of the SportsMax Zone. Now, we are exactly 1 week away from the highly anticipated Issa Grace Kennedy Boys and Girls Championships in Jamaica, set for March 25 to 29 on the newly laid track at the National Stadium in Kingston. While athletes are preparing for the event, news broke of an investigation by World Athletics into alleged age fraud from Kenyan athletes. A story published by online media house The Running Week says the investigations focus on the 2024 World Under-20 Championships held in Lima, Peru, with lead investigators, Athletics Kenya, identifying at least 30 cases implicating athletes, parents, coaches, and teachers, insinuating a possible systematic operation. Now, this is just the latest of age fraud allegations against African nations. In 2023, 31 Cameroonian footballers were expelled from their under-17 national team after coach Samuel Eto'o ordered scientific age tests on all players. So widespread has this issue been across Africa that in 2017, Mibi Jerome Tosam, a student at the University of Bamida in Cameroon, produced an academic piece looking at the ethical and social implications of age cheating in Africa. This is what he opined. There exists an inextricable link between bad governance, economic hardship, and the collapse of moral values in most African countries. Using Cameroon as an example, I maintain that age cheating is one of the several corrupt ways citizens in most post-colonial African states use as a way out of unemployment, chronic poverty, and political and economic deprivation. Also, age cheating is common in African countries where the civil registration system is either archaic or completely inexistent. Now, in recent years, there's been an influx of African athletes in the Jamaican high school system, and with this latest scandal affecting the sport of track and field, we turn to discuss the plans in place to protect Jamaican high schools from falling victim to age fraud. All right, joining us for today's discussion, we will have the president of the Intersecondary School Sports Association, the governing body for high school sports in Jamaica. His name is Keith Wellington. And we have on set with us John Leiber. He is the manager of the St. Jago High School track and field team. And he joins us on set. Before we get into the discussion, though, let's have a look at the list of African athletes currently in the Jamaican high school system. Page 1 starts with the athletes from Kingston College. So Julius Sitobo, he's come this season. He is a Class 4 athlete who will be competing in Class 3 at 800. Well, he can only compete in one of the two events at Champs. Likely will be the 1500. In Class 2, they have Victor Kagisa and Peter Njuguna, both ineligible for Champs 2025. And then in Class 1, they have Stephen Maturi, Chris Wanjiku, Brian Kiprop, and Nahashan Ruto. The last three have all competed at Champs in the past. So those are the athletes from Kingston College. Then you have Evans Tete and Dominica Ponso, both Ghanaian athletes who represent Jamaica College. St. Jago, they have Ryan Achal, the outstanding 1500, 5000 campaigner. He is Kenyan, along with his teammate Kim Yotai. And Homo Technical, they have Florence Nafamba out of Uganda, who has been there for a few seasons now. Now, we were also hoping to have Kingston College and Jamaica College representatives in this discussion, as they have among the most African athletes in their ranks, as you just saw. However, principals Dave Myrie of Kingston College and Wayne Robinson of Jamaica College said they were both unable to attend. And we were also supposed to have a Calabar Pass student who had some difficulties in the moments leading up to the segment and was unable to join us. So since we have Mr. Leiber on set, let's start with him because this is a serious issue, Mr. Leiber. A lot of discussion right across the country for a number of years now, ever since in 2017 when Ariamania Rogers came to Kingston College, and individuals have differing views about Africans coming into the Jamaican high school system. And then this story earlier this year about the age fraud and the World Athletics investigation. How did that story grab you?
You know, it's to my mind, it's a situation where you look at Jamaica's athletics, and it's really a developing system. And tempted though you are to say, well, you know, these guys should be excluded, there's a strong temptation to do that. But the point is this, that we send our athletes to America, and they participate. So the fact of the matter is that the system might benefit. I don't think it fully benefits from the injection of the Africans, although it's a bit of a disadvantage. But the fact of the matter, we have seen where maybe JC and other schools, and I certainly we have had people who have beaten them, and for a time, I think that people have not really studied the science of it, because they have an inherent advantage by being born there. But if you don't compensate, after a number of years, they literally become ordinary.
Yeah. As to the specific issue about the concerns that the African athletes who come into the Jamaican high school system ensuring that they are the age that they say they are, how did that specific investigation from World Athletics catch you?
Wow, it's a bit frightening, and the thoughts that cross my mind as a lawyer is that, you know, maybe systems ought to be put in place. You mentioned, I think, Cameroon and other countries where some sort of tests, you know, some sort of biological test was done. That's costly and would take time, but it's a possibility that should be checked on. That possibility should be looked at, because you don't, you know, it's competitive enough, you know, and no sector should be given an unfair advantage in this regard.
Yeah, the president of the Intersecondary School Sports Association, Issa Keith Wellington, is with us now. Mr. Wellington, good afternoon and welcome. It's a pleasure. We're really happy that you were able to join us. As for the specific World Athletics investigation, Mr. Wellington, into alleged age fraud in Kenya specifically, how did that story catch you?
All right, so just before I comment on the story, I think it would be appropriate for us to declare that we have had instances of age fraud in Jamaica, and I think I probably should start with my own school. I think just over 30 odd years ago, we were banned for a year, every single sporting activity that our school participated in. At ISA, we were barred from participating because of a matter relating to a birth certificate / age fraud. We have had other instances, I think as recently as early 2000s, where another youngster from another school, again, having competed at camps.
That's Tristan Taylor from Central High.
Right. So we have had instances of cases of age fraud and birth certificate fraud. And obviously there have also been many suggestions that not proven that have occurred. As it relates to the specific article, for me it is not surprising. As you know, Ricardo, I follow a lot of sports, and this is something that has been, you know, Pakistan, the Middle East, and African countries. There have been many allegations of persons whose age on record is not necessarily their biological age. So I'm not surprised about the revelations. I'm happy that there are documentations in place, the research from the university student, the fact that World Athletics has done their own investigation. I'm happy for that.
Are you concerned as the president of the Intersecondary School Sports Association when you see an investigation like that, first of all, and then you look at the scenario in Jamaica with the number of African athletes coming into the system, and specifically Kenyan athletes coming into the system, given this specific investigation?
But part of the rules of PISA is that there are certain basic criteria that each student plus school must meet. One of them is the age criteria. So because our competitions are age group related, and so age is a significant determinant for people to participate in our activities. So if there are any questions raised about persons' eligibility in terms of age, whether a local or foreign athlete, it becomes an issue for us. We have to investigate. As it relates to the specific scenario and the fact that Kenya has been highlighted as situation, as being in a position where it is something that is practiced widely, then yes, it would mean that we have to be careful. We have had documentation from all these schools regarding to these student athletes and their age and birth certificates. And there are questions sometimes that are raised. Sometimes we have to take what we get on face value. But obviously, as it becomes more prevalent and more questions are raised, we have to find a way to ensure, to verify that what we are getting is what is real.
Yeah, how far are you, Mr. Wellington, on that journey to finding a way in ensuring that what you get on paper is what is real?
All right. So first of all, we have made sure to ensure that the documentation itself is real. What is on the documentation sometimes now is where we would have to do the type of investigation that World Athletics has done to verify and to ascertain the validity of the information, because in most cases these are documents that are issued legally, and they are not really fraudulent in terms of the issuance and it going through government process. So for example, one of the questions that was one of the comments that was made last year when we had some questions for some of the athletes that came was that, but these persons are persons who were issued passports by their governments, which suggests that they use legitimate documents. So the documents themselves are sometimes, well, I would suppose are legitimate, but the data. So for example, one of the things that I find with the Africans and Middle Eastern countries that their registration of birth is always late. So somebody is born in 2010, for example, and they are not registered until 2020. Now, after 10 years, there is likely to be an issue with the accuracy of the data that is provided to the registrar. And I think that is where most of the issues come, where birth and accuracy of birth information is. And again, if we go back to our situation as Jamaican, that was the situation in Jamaica some years ago as well. There are many Jamaicans who have two date of birth. One date that they were actually born, and two, the date that they were registered as being born. That a generation or so ago, that was what existed in Jamaica. So it is not something that is unique to the African countries, but we have to ensure that it doesn't create a disadvantage for our student athletes who are here in their local environment.
Yeah, interesting take there, Mr. Wellington. Let me just get back to Mr. Leiber here on this issue, because I don't know if you can help in getting an understanding. One of the main questions that I hear around is how do these athletes get into the Jamaican system? You spoke earlier about Jamaicans competing in the U.S. collegiate system. The U.S. college coaches in many instances come to Jamaica and they recruit the best of the talent. So let's take St. Jago as an example. You have the outstanding Ryan Achow. Is it a situation where you go to recruit, or is it a situation where these athletes just reach out to you by whatever means?
What has happened is that because of the linkage with the American system, the American system for a number of years have recruited African athletes. And so there is linkage. So you know, if one has if you have a connection with a coach in America, you can have a link. He can give you a link in Africa and so that is how one would reach it out. One would
Seems like a friend is giving you a call there. Yeah. So you're saying it's not necessarily a case where the institution or institutions recruit, or specifically in your case, but that these athletes come to you?
No, I say it's a usually there's a sort of reaching out, because it's a considerable cost in terms of boarding that athletes and so on and so forth, and maybe they see it as a springboard to get to America, so they are quite willing to come to Jamaica, in the hope that they will eventually go to a U.S. college.
Yeah. Mr. Wellington, does that make the situation potentially more dangerous? Because I was very interested in the academic paper where it speaks to the circumstances under which these student athletes are looking to leave their countries. They're looking for a better life, and that's part of the reason they falsify a lot of these documents, because they're trying to get out of poverty, and they're doing everything they can to get out of poverty. And in this case, as Mr. Leiber points out, which I completely agree with, because there are those linkages, because Jamaican athletes have over time successfully gotten into U.S. systems, then Jamaica is seen as a viable pathway. Does that make the potential for fraud, and specifically in this case, age fraud, more possible and more concerning from an ISA standpoint?
Obviously, Ricardo, yes, it does, because the incentive is greater. It's no different from, as I said, from our situation from time to time. We know that it exists. It's a situation that exists in football as well. And so it is something that we have to be wary of. We have to understand that the opportunity and the incentive to come to Jamaica, participate in our athletics program is really, really high. And as John said, the link between Jamaica and the US, the fact that we are heavily scouted by US colleges, means that the opportunities for a youngster anywhere else, not just Africa, the Caribbean, wherever else, increases if they are able to get to Jamaica and perform. So the incentive is there. What we have to do is to ensure that we have the measures in place to ensure that they are not cracks that allow these fraudulent activities to take place, and ultimately may cause us harm as a country as well. It's not just that these persons, we are going to try and stop them from coming or deprive them of the opportunity. But the truth is that if we don't have our house in order, outside of our competence being affected, then we could be viewed as providing an opportunity, for example, human trafficking.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to ensure that we take care of all our rules and make sure that we have measures in place. That we have students, yes, we allow them to come, but they are legitimate students and they are meeting the expectations that we have in terms of our rules and regulations.
Yeah, given the dangers that exist, Mr. President, one, does ISA have the resources to go as far as, let's say, the Cameroonian football president Samuel Eto'o went a few years ago by ordering scientific tests? And if not, do you suspect that there could ever be a time when ISA could have those resources or need to put those levels of resources in place?
I think I'm kind of at a crossroads where that is concerned now, but obviously it is somewhere that we have to look at, a road that we have to look at. The possibility exists, as I said. This is a phenomenon that is not unusual, and therefore it is something that can be a reality of ours. And so we have to look at the measures that we can take. In terms of whether or not we have the resources, I think the onus, for example, may be placed on the school to ensure that we have valid and verified documents to prove that the suspicions that may exist are valid. I know some persons will start to cry discrimination, but again, and that's why I said at the outset that I'm happy that these findings are being documented, because if it is that we know that we're getting persons out of a particular environment, we have to make sure that the measures are in place to protect our schools as well. Because remember, again, where I started, St. Elizabeth Technical High School was banned for 1 year. Every single sporting activities that we participated in, we could not participate in inter competitions because a Jamaican student produced, well, it was found that he used a birth certificate that did not reflect his true age. And that was a Jamaican student. And the entire school population suffered for that. So I think the presidency is already there, and that isn't the only incident that has taken place. So I think ISA is well within its rights, and it has already set the precedent to ensure that we keep our competitions clean.
Yeah, but by the way, Mr. Leiber remembers the name as Sims.
I remember Yadburn Sims, because I've been in middle distance fraternity, and this fella, he looked very young, and he was actually 23. He ran under 18, and he had all the papers, and it's but because of the querulous nature of our athletic community, somebody went to where he was born and found at the hospital found the exact age. But he had passport and everything. He had gotten birth certificates.
Yeah.
He actually won either 3,000 or the 5,000 at the time.
Yeah, and there's the issue I want to dig a little deeper into, Mr. President, because I hear you about putting measures in place, right? Which is all good and well, but and about proper documentation, but as you have already established, the documents might seem perfectly fine, but that does not mean the information on those documents is correct. And so it is about going beyond that to ensure that it is the case. I don't know if that is asking too much, and I don't know if you think that is asking too much, but I don't know if I'm pushing too much, but I want to get from the Intersecondary School Sports Association if this is something they are discussing seriously to go beyond just getting the documentation, because we now know that in and of itself might not be enough.
Can I make a suggestion?
So my response, Ricardo, would be it is something that has been discussed and is being discussed in terms of maintaining the integrity and the credibility of our competitions. The measures that we can take or are willing to take would be whatever measures that are in keeping with our legal abilities. We have had discussions about some of the options that are available to us. But we also want to ensure that we do not malign persons, whether it's our schools or individuals. So we want to have reason to ensure that we take on individuals where there are questions, or we have a standard procedure for everybody. So that is where we are now in determining where we go to ensure that we maintain our credibility.
Yeah, I think Mr. Leiber has a suggestion.
I think, Mr. President, I think we need to engage the UWI or the scientific community, engage them as a partner. I don't think ISA would have the resources or the things. So we need a specific partner, and and maybe from time to time.
But John, remember, where we come in now, we talk about resources. We have to start with a policy. So we have to determine what is it we want, what is it we are willing to accept, what we are not going to willing to be with, and then we find partners that first of all will be able to help us to craft a policy that is legitimate, and then the execution of the policy we will also need partners as well. So we have to start by getting a policy in place, and again we have to be careful that that policy is not discriminatory, right? So yes, I agree with you that we will not be able to do this all on our own. And I remember even the schools that these kids represent, they are our member schools. So it is a discussion that would take place with the persons who are involved, the schools that are involved, because it's a member association made up of the St. Diego's, the KCs, the JCs, and all of that, right? And ultimately, we have to come to a consensus as an association as to what our policy will be.
Yeah, Mr. Wellington, we're fast running out of time, but based on what you just said, it sounds to me like this policy could take a few years.
No. I would say to you that it may take a few months or a few weeks.
That's interesting. We look forward to that. Keith Wellington, we're fast out of time. We're really happy that you were able to join us and start this discussion. And I really believe that this is only the start of the discussion. I'm sure we'll be chatting again on this issue. Take care.
Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon. John,
Thank you.
all
Thank
the
you,
best,
Pete.
Pacha.
I have a suggestion.
Right,
I have somebody who's willing to sponsor a cup for combined to get the schools, to encourage the schools to do both male and female, and he's willing to put up money to foster that. So I'm gonna write something to you, Mr. President, because we need to encourage that.
All right, we're getting a lot.
And since you're going to eventually get a trophy.
I best in interest.
We're getting a lot of suggestions on today's show. We are absolutely out of time for today's show. By the way, I just want to make the point, Lance and Mr. Leiber, because I don't want this to be misconstrued in any way, that the discussion that we just had is not in any way to malign any institution, but it's a real issue that we face, and one that it is important for us to start the conversation. The conversation has started here, and hopefully we can have more healthy conversations going forward and ultimately arrive at a solution that is in the best interest of the country and the country's track and field. All right? We're out of time. Is that it for the show?
Yes, it is.
Oh, my goodness.
The time ran off.
It ran off. John, you're closing the show. Do you want to close the show and tell them we'll be back tomorrow?
Well, you're going to invite me back tomorrow? Well, it has been great. I mean, because I've known you guys, and, and it's been so long. I mean, Lance and, Ricardo. I remember quite well with Danny all the time. But that's another matter we can talk of.
We can talk about. I tell you something, though. You know Lance a lot longer than you've known me. Ricardo Chambers, Lance Whitaker, Mariah Ramarak. Join us tomorrow again for the SportsMax Zone.
Thank you.